At first, it didn't look like a machine of death. It looked like paperwork. Forms stamped and signed. Orders typed neatly. Men in pressed uniforms moving quietly through offices, corridors, railway stations. No screaming. No chaos. Just procedure. Somewhere between a desk and a train schedule, millions of lives were decided without a single bullet being fired. This is the part of the Holocaust that is hardest to understand. Not how violent it was, but how organized it became. How murder was turned into a job description. How an institution learned to make killing feel ordinary. The men who built this system didn't always see blood. Many never pulled a trigger. They planned. They supervised. They optimized. And because it worked so smoothly, because it looked so official, almost no one stopped it. This story is not about monsters hiding in the dark. It's about structure, loyalty, obedience, and a single organization that learned how to absorb power piece by piece until it controlled police, intelligence, camps, and death itself. Once you see how it worked, you'll understand something terrifying. It didn't require chaos. It required order. Night falls over a defeated nation, and the streets do not grow quiet. They pulse. Boots strike pavement in uneven rhythms. Voices shout slogans that echo off shattered stone. Somewhere in the darkness, glass breaks, followed by laughter, then screams. Germany after the Great War smells of damp coal smoke, cheap alcohol, and unresolved rage. Men drift home from taverns with clenched fists and hollow eyes, carrying defeat like a private wound. Flags hang from windows not in celebration, but in defiance. The war is over, yet violence has not learned how to stop. In this chaos, survival belongs to those who can protect themselves, and power belongs to those willing to use force. In beer halls thick with smoke and sweat, politics is no longer debated, it is shouted. Chairs scrape across wooden floors. Fists land. Knives flash. Every movement has its own muscle. Every idea its own enforcers. The young Weimar Republic trembles under the weight of uprisings, street battles, and assassinations. Communist militias clash with nationalist gangs. Police arrive late, if they arrive at all. Law feels distant, fragile, optional. In this environment, ideas alone are useless. To exist, a movement must be able to defend itself. To grow, it must intimidate its enemies into silence. One man understands this instinctively. Adolf Hitler does not yet command a state, but he commands attention. His speeches ignite rooms. His presence electrifies crowds, and his enemies are many. Every appearance carries risk. Every rally could turn violent. Every train platform could become an ambush. Around him gathers a loose ring of followers, men who watch doorways, scan faces, and position themselves between their leader and danger. They are not soldiers. They are not famous. Most are interchangeable, yet they share one quality that matters more than skill or strength. They are loyal to him personally. At first, this protection is improvised. Former soldiers with stiff postures and old uniforms stand near the podium. Men who fought in trenches now fight hecklers. They shove opponents out of halls, break up disruptions, and escort Hitler through back exits when crowds turn ugly. Their presence is practical, not symbolic. No one imagines them shaping history. They exist to keep one man alive long enough to speak. These early guards are overshadowed by something louder, larger, and far more visible. The Sturmabteilung, the SA, floods the streets in brown shirts. They march, they brawl, they dominate public space with noise and numbers. Their boots drum intimidation into cobblestones. They look like power. They feel unstoppable. Next to them, Hitler's personal guards seem almost invisible, blending into shadows, waiting rather than charging. While the SA thrives on spectacle, these men thrive on proximity. They stand close enough to smell sweat on Hitler's coat, close enough to hear his breath before he speaks. In 1925, this small circle receives a name: Schutzstaffel, Protective Squad. The word sounds mundane, almost bureaucratic. There is no promise of conquest in it, no hint of empire. Just protection. Just duty. The group remains tiny, barely noticed, even within the Nazi Party itself. Its members wear black caps with skull insignia borrowed from older military traditions. A quiet symbol meant more for internal recognition than public intimidation. Their numbers are counted in dozens, not thousands. They answer directly to Hitler, bypassing party bureaucracy. This direct line of loyalty becomes their defining feature. While the SA swells with unemployed men drawn to violence, the Schutzstaffel becomes selective. Membership is invitation, not mass recruitment. Backgrounds are examined. Personal reliability matters more than enthusiasm. These men are not rewarded with street dominance or political influence. Their reward is proximity. They stand close to power, even if power has not yet fully arrived. As Germany sinks deeper into economic crisis, desperation sharpens every conflict. Inflation devours savings. Families trade furniture for bread. The air feels heavy with resentment, and every political promise sounds like salvation. The Nazi Party grows rapidly, feeding on humiliation and fear. With growth comes danger. Rival factions, plot disruptions. Assassination attempts are whispered about constantly. Each rally becomes a gamble. Each speech could be the last. The Schutzstaffel adapts quietly. They study crowd movement. They learn how to spot threats before fists fly. They memorize escape routes and building layouts. Their work is intimate and tense. Hands hover near concealed weapons. Eyes track strangers lingering too long. Every sound carries potential meaning. A shout could be enthusiasm or warning. A sudden movement could be applause or attack. Their world is made of seconds. Hitler notices. He values loyalty above all else. And these men demonstrate it without question. They do not argue. They do not compete for attention. They exist to serve. Slowly, trust builds. Slowly, responsibility expands. The Schutzstaffel is entrusted with internal security at party events. They enforce discipline. They remove disloyal members. They observe, report, and remember. In a movement built on suspicion, memory becomes power. The failed beer hall, putsch leaves scars on the party and its leader. Prison replaces the street. Silence replaces speeches. Yet even in defeat, loyalty is tested and refined. Those who remain faithful during collapse are remembered when success returns. When Hitler emerges from prison determined to seize power legally, he does so with a clearer vision. Street chaos must be harnessed. Violence must be organized. Loyalty must be institutionalized. The Schutzstaffel fits perfectly into this vision. Small enough to control, devoted enough to trust, detached enough from mass politics to operate quietly. While the SA continues to swell, becoming unruly and politically ambitious, the Schutzstaffel remains obedient. They do not dream of revolution on the streets. They dream of order, of hierarchy, of belonging to something exclusive and permanent. By the late 1920s, the atmosphere inside the group changes. Ritual replaces improvisation. Oaths are formalized. Loyalty is no longer assumed, is sworn. Membership becomes identity. These men begin to see themselves not as guards, but as an elite bound by shared purpose. Their black uniforms grow sharper, more deliberate. The skull insignia takes on meaning. Death, sacrifice, and permanence are no longer abstract ideas. They are embraced. The public still barely notices them. Newspapers focus on the SA sprawls and marches. Politicians fear the brown shirts. Few understand that power is slowly concentrating elsewhere, away from noise and toward structure. The Schutzstaffel does not need mass approval. It needs access. It needs trust. It needs time. Inside party headquarters, files accumulate. Names are recorded. Opponents are categorized. Friends are distinguished from liabilities. The Schutzstaffel becomes a quiet channel through which information flows upward. Not rumors shouted in taverns, but observations delivered calmly, efficiently. This informational role deepens their importance. They're no longer just shields. They are eyes and ears. As Hitler's political fortunes rise, the stakes sharpen. More enemies emerge. More threats materialize. The Schutzstaffel grows slowly, deliberately, choosing quality over quantity. Its members are trained to obey without hesitation, to act without recognition, to prioritize command over conscience. These traits are praised. They are framed as virtues necessary for survival in a hostile world. Germany itself seems to mirror this transformation. Disorder gives way to longing for stability. Chaos makes discipline attractive. The promise of strong authority feels comforting after years of uncertainty. In this emotional climate, the idea of an elite protective force bound by loyalty does not alarm. It reassures. By the time the Nazi Party stands on the threshold of national power, the Schutzstaffel is no longer insignificant. It is still small, still underestimated, but possesses something far more dangerous than numbers. It possesses a direct bond to leadership, an internal culture of obedience, and a growing belief that it exists above ordinary rules. What began as a handful of men guarding a speaker in smoky beer halls has become a framework waiting to be filled. Soon, this organization will be handed authority, weapons, and purpose far beyond protection. And when that moment comes, the qualities that once seemed harmless, loyalty, discipline, silence, will begin to transform into something far darker. The shadows around the podium are growing longer now, and the guards standing within them are no longer content to merely protect. They are preparing to rule. The men who once stood quietly in the shadows now begin to notice something unsettling about themselves. They are no longer reacting to danger. They are anticipating it. What started as instinct hardens into habit, and habit into belief. In rooms where maps hang crooked on smoke-stained walls, where boots are stacked neatly beside doors, the Schutzstaffel starts to feel less like a temporary solution and more like something permanent. The air inside these spaces smells of leather, ink, and cold iron. Conversations are low and deliberate. Orders are no longer suggestions. They are expectations. Germany itself seems to lean into this transformation. The country is tired of shouting, of fighting, of humiliation. The noise of the streets has not vanished, but beneath it runs a quieter hunger, a desire for order, for certainty, for someone who knows what comes next. The Nazi movement senses this shift, and within it, the Schutzstaffel senses something even deeper. Chaos has created opportunity, and opportunity favors those prepared to control it. Adolf Hitler's relationship with his personal guard changes subtly, but decisively. He no longer sees them only as shields against violence. He sees them as proof that absolute loyalty can exist, proof that men can surrender themselves fully to a cause embodied in a single leader. When he looks at them, he does not see individuals. He sees a model, a template for what the future could look like if obedience replaced debate and devotion replaced law. This is where the Schutzstaffel begins to separate itself from the noise of mass politics. While the SA continues to swell with raw energy and ambition, the SS turns inward. Selection tightens. Discipline sharpens. Membership is no longer about enthusiasm or numbers. It becomes about trust, about reliability, about the willingness to obey without hesitation and to remain silent without resentment. Silence becomes a currency. The ability to hear everything and say nothing is rewarded. Into this environment steps a man who understands systems better than slogans. Heinrich Himmler does not command attention with volume or presence. His voice is controlled, his movements restrained, his confidence rooted in administration rather than charisma. Where others see rallies and uniforms, he sees registries, rules, and hierarchy. He recognizes immediately that the Schutzstaffel is unfinished, and that its unfinished nature makes it malleable. Himmler's first instinct is not to expand, but to define. He believes identity must precede power. Under his influence, the Schutzstaffel begins to codify itself. Background checks grow intrusive. Genealogies are examined. Family histories are traced backward, generation by generation, searching for purity as if it were a measurable substance. This scrutiny is invasive, unsettling, and deliberately exclusionary. To belong is to be chosen. To be chosen is to be superior. That belief seeps into every interaction. Training shifts accordingly. Physical discipline remains important, but ideological discipline becomes paramount. Men are taught not just how to act, but how to think. Loyalty is framed not as a personal decision, but as a moral obligation. The idea of doubt is quietly recast as weakness. Questions become threats. Obedience becomes a form of strength. Over time, this mindset fuses with identity so completely that disobedience feels like betrayal of the self. The rituals deepen. Oaths are sworn in candlelit rooms, voices echoing off stone walls. Symbols are repeated until they lose ambiguity and gain weight. The black uniform becomes more than clothing. It becomes separation. When an SS man looks at himself, he no longer sees a citizen of Germany first. He sees a member of an order. The uniform tightens posture, narrows expression, and reshapes behavior. It carries expectation on its shoulders. Outside these rooms, Germany continues to fracture. Elections are fought with fizz as often as ballots. Political assassinations leave blood on sidewalks that passers-by learn to step around. Each crisis reinforces the narrative forming within the Schutzstaffel. Democracy is weak. Debate is dangerous. Stability requires control, and control must be enforced by those willing to shoulder its burden without complaint. Himmler pushes this logic further. He envisions the Schutzstaffel not as a temporary instrument, but as a generational elite. Marriage becomes regulated. Relationships are encouraged or discouraged based on racial criteria. Children are no longer just family. They are future assets. The SS begins to think in decades, not elections. This long view sets it apart from other organizations obsessed with immediate power. At the same time, proximity to Hitler tightens. SS officers gain increasing access to private spaces, private conversations, private fears. They learn his routines, his preferences, his moods. This intimacy creates dependency. The leader trusts those closest to him. Those closest to him shape what he hears. Gradually, influence flows upward as much as authority flows downward. The Schutzstaffel's role inside the Nazi Party expands quietly. Internal disputes are handled discreetly. Loyalty is monitored. Potential threats are identified before they act. Information is passed calmly, efficiently, without emotion. The SS becomes indispensable not because it demands power, but because it solves problems others create. In contrast, the SA grows restless. Its leaders hunger for recognition, for influence, for rewards matching their sacrifices. Their public presence becomes both asset and liability. They are visible, loud, and increasingly uncontrollable. Street violence that once served the movement now threatens its respectability. The contrast between the two organizations sharpens. One shouts, the other listens. One demands, the other waits. Waiting becomes the Schutzstaffel's greatest weapon. They do not compete. They observe. They record. They position themselves as the solution to problems they did not publicly create. When tensions rise between the Nazi Party and conservative elites, when businessmen and military officers grow nervous about chaos, it is the SS that appears calm, disciplined, reassuring. Their very restraint becomes persuasive. The internal culture of the Schutzstaffel hardens alongside this growing trust. Punishment for disobedience is swift and unforgiving. Removal from the organization is framed as disgrace, not release. Fear and pride intertwine. Members police themselves as much as they are policed from above. The system begins to sustain itself. By the time the Nazis approach national power, the Schutzstaffel is no longer simply guarding the movement. It is shaping it. Its values seep into decision-making. Its methods influence strategy. Its vision of order begins to replace improvisation. What began as protection has become preparation. There is a subtle shift in language that few notice at first. The Schutzstaffel no longer speaks only of defense. It speaks of responsibility, of guardianship, of destiny. Words acquire weight. The idea that some people must be protected from others evolves quietly into the idea that some people must be removed for the protection of the whole. The men inside the black uniforms feel this shift before they fully understand it. Something is changing. Their role is expanding beyond safety into authority. They are no longer merely standing between danger and a leader. They are beginning to stand between society and itself. As the final barriers to power begin to crack, the Schutzstaffel stands ready, structured, loyal, convinced of its own necessity. When the moment arrives, when violence must be legalized and control formalized, it will not hesitate. It has been trained not to. The Shadow Guard has learned who it is now, and soon it will learn what it is capable of doing. Power rarely announces itself with violence at first. It arrives quietly, through doors left unlocked, through rules rewritten in small print, through authority that feels temporary until it isn't. By the time most people sense it, the balance has already shifted. In Germany, that shift begins not with tanks or camps, but with signatures, appointments, and men who understand how to turn proximity into control. When Adolf Hitler becomes chancellor, the streets do not suddenly fall silent. The noise remains. Marching boots still echo. Flags still wave. But behind the spectacle, something far more important is happening. The Nazi movement is no longer fighting for power. It is learning how to hold it. And the Schutzstaffel, once content to wait in the shadows, senses that its moment has arrived. The early months of rule feel unstable, almost fragile. Old institutions still exist. Courts still function. Police forces still answer, at least on paper, to the state. Yet loyalty begins to matter more than law. Trust becomes the true currency. Hitler surrounds himself with men he believes will not hesitate, will not question, will not flinch when ordered to act. And among all the organizations competing for influence, the SS stands apart precisely because it does not compete openly at all. The men in black uniforms move carefully now. They speak less in public and more in private offices. They are assigned to roles that sound administrative, harmless even. Liaison, coordination, security oversight. Each title places them closer to levers of authority without drawing attention. Each placement feels temporary, justified by crisis, framed as necessity. Crisis becomes the excuse that never expires. Germany's police forces are the first target, though no one calls it that yet. Policing, after all, is about order. And order, the Nazis insist, is under threat. Street violence, political opposition, sabotage, subversion. The language is vague enough to include almost anyone. The SS positions itself as the solution. Disciplined, ideologically reliable, untainted by old loyalties. Gradually, oversight roles turn to command roles. Police officials are pressured, replaced, or absorbed. Some cooperate willingly, believing alignment will protect their careers. Others resist quietly and find themselves transferred, sidelined, or investigated. Files disappear. Accusations surface. Fear does the rest. The process is efficient, methodical, and largely invisible to the public. There are no mass arrests yet. No dramatic takeovers. Just a slow redirection of authority. Inside SS offices, the atmosphere changes. The smell of ink and paper grows stronger. Filing cabinets multiply. Information begins to flow inward from every corner of society. Reports arrive daily. Names, addresses, affiliations. Patterns are identified. Threats are ranked. The SS is learning to see the population not as citizens, but as data points. Categories replace complexity. Labels replace humanity. The transformation accelerates when policing merges with intelligence. Surveillance becomes systematic rather than reactive. Informants are cultivated. Ordinary citizens are encouraged to report suspicious behavior, suspicious speech, suspicious neighbors. The act of watching becomes normalized. Silence becomes suspicious. The SS does not need to be everywhere if it can convince people that it might be anywhere. This new power changes how SS members see themselves. They are no longer merely elite guards or ideological believers. They are administrators of society, gatekeepers of belonging. The authority to arrest without trial, to detain without explanation, to interrogate without oversight reshapes their sense of responsibility. Orders come down cleanly. Morality is removed from the equation. The system decides. The individual executes. Fear spreads not through brutality alone, but through uncertainty. No one knows exactly where the limits are. No one knows who is watching. The SS understands this dynamic instinctively. Clear rules would invite resistance. Ambiguity paralyzes it. People adapt. They censor themselves. They comply preemptively. The SS learns that power works best when it is felt more than seen. Within the Nazi leadership, tensions grow. Old elites worry about chaos. Industrialists want stability. Military officers want predictability. The SA, with its mass violence and revolutionary rhetoric, becomes a liability. Its leaders speak openly about reshaping society, about replacing traditional hierarchies. Their ambition alarms those who support Hitler's still needs. The question of control becomes urgent. The SS watches closely. It does not intervene publicly. It does not challenge. It prepares. Files are compiled. Allegiances are mapped. Weaknesses identified. Loyalty tests become more frequent. The organization that once waited in doorways now positions itself as the only force capable of enforcing order without threatening the state itself. The irony is deliberate. The SS presents itself as restraint. Behind closed doors, plans are discussed with chilling calm. Names are listed. Units are assigned. Timelines are set. The SS is no longer reacting to events. It is shaping them. When violence finally comes, it will be precise, targeted, and justified as necessity. The groundwork has been laid through months of quiet consolidation. The purge that follows shocks the nation, not because it happens, but because of how efficiently it is executed. Leaders of the SA are arrested and killed. Political rivals disappear overnight. The message is unmistakable. Loyalty to Hitler is non-negotiable. And the organization that enforces this truth is the SS. In a matter of days, it eliminates its most powerful rival and secures its position at the center of the regime. Afterward, the balance of power is irrevocably altered. The SA is broken. The army swears loyalty. Conservative elites breathe a sigh of relief. Order has been restored, they believe. What they do not see is that the restoration of order has come at the cost of law itself. The SS has demonstrated that it can kill legally, efficiently, and with approval. This moment transforms the SS from an instrument into an authority. It now controls policing, intelligence, and internal security. Its leaders answer directly to Hitler. Civilian oversight becomes ceremonial. Courts are sidelined. Justice becomes administrative. Decisions are made behind desks rather than in courtrooms. The men who carry out arrests feel the shift immediately. Doors are no longer knocked on politely. They are kicked open. Papers are waved less often. Authority is assumed. Prisoners are no longer processed through normal channels. They are taken somewhere else. Places with no addresses, no records, no witnesses. The idea of protective custody emerges, vague enough to justify indefinite detention. These early detention sites are crude, improvised, brutal. Old warehouses, abandoned factories, remote compounds. They are not yet designed to kill en masse, but they are designed to break. Prisoners are beaten, humiliated, starved. The SS studies the effects carefully. What methods inspire fear fastest? What conditions erode resistance most efficiently? Even suffering becomes data. Within the organization, a new confidence takes root. The SS has crossed a threshold. It has learned that violence, when wrapped in legality and framed as necessity, encounters little resistance. Each successful action reinforces the belief that restraint is weakness and decisiveness is virtue. The language inside the organization hardens. Enemies are no longer political opponents. They are threats, pathogens, obstacles. The bureaucracy expands alongside the brutality. More offices, more ranks, more regulations governing who commands whom. Structure becomes obsession. Every SS man knows exactly where he stands in the hierarchy and exactly whom he answers to. This clarity creates comfort. Responsibility feels shared, diluted, abstract. Orders flow downward. Blame evaporates upward. Germany itself begins to feel different. The streets are quieter, but not because fear has vanished. It has simply gone indoors. Conversations lower. Eyes avert. People learn which topics to avoid, which jokes to suppress, which opinions to keep private. The SS does not need to announce its presence. Its reputation does the work for it. Inside the organization, long-term ambitions begin to surface openly. The SS is no longer content to protect the regime. It intends to shape the future. Population policy, racial classification, social engineering. Ideas that once sounded extreme are now discussed as administrative challenges. Problems to be solved, systems to be designed. This is the moment when the SS truly becomes a state within a state. It controls force. It controls information. It controls fear. And it operates with a sense of destiny that makes compromise unthinkable. What began as protection has become domination. As the foundations settle, the SS looks outward, beyond Germany, beyond opposition, toward a vision of total control that will soon require far more than arrests and intimidation. The machinery is in place now. The laws are flexible. The people are conditioned. All that remains is opportunity. And opportunity is coming. Once a system learns how to watch, it never forgets how. The question is no longer whether power can be enforced, but how deeply it can reach. By the time the SS secures its position after the purge, fear has already changed shape. It no longer announces itself with gunfire in the streets. It listens. It records. It waits. The sound of boots is replaced by the scratch of pens, the hum of offices late into the night, the quiet click of filing cabinets closing on names that will not be forgotten. Germany is still visible to itself as a nation of laws, courts, and procedures, but beneath that surface another country is forming, one that operates by different rules. In this hidden country, information is power, and power belongs to those who know the most, who see the most, who could decide what is normal and what is dangerous. The SS understands this with absolute clarity. Control of violence was only the beginning. Control of knowledge will make that violence permanent. The merger of intelligence and policing does not happen overnight. It unfolds through memos, reorganizations, new chains of command that appear logical on paper. Existing police forces are told they will benefit from better coordination, improved efficiency, centralized reporting. The language is clean, professional, reassuring. No one is told that independence is being erased. It simply disappears between paragraphs. Inside these newly consolidated offices, the atmosphere is precise and tense. Desks are aligned. Files are standardized. Reports follow strict formats. The men who work here are trained to remove emotion from observation. A neighbor's behavior becomes an entry. A comment overheard in a cafe becomes a note. Attendance at a meeting becomes suspicion. The act of living leaves a trail, and the SS begins collecting it. The Sicherheitsdienst, the intelligence arm of the SS, grows rapidly in importance. Its task is not arrest, but interpretation. It listens for trends, moods, shifts in opinion. It tracks loyalty not just to the state, but to ideology. Approval is measured. Doubt is mapped. Entire communities are reduced to psychological profiles. The SS does not want chaos. It wants predictability. And predictability requires information. At the same time, the secret police expands its reach. Arrests no longer require evidence in the traditional sense. Suspicion is enough. Protective custody becomes a tool flexible enough to justify anything. A person can be removed for their own safety, for public order, for vague threats that never need to be explained. Families are given no answers. Employers are told nothing. The absence itself becomes the warning. This fusion of intelligence and terror changes the rhythm of daily life. People begin to feel watched, even when alone. Conversations end abruptly when strangers approach. Letters are written carefully, then rewritten, then burned. Fear becomes internalized. The SS does not need to knock on every door. It needs only to convince people that it could. Within SS leadership, this success breeds confidence. Surveillance is no longer seen as a tool of repression, but as a form of governance. Society can be shaped by pressure rather than persuasion. Compliance can be engineered. The idea that dissent might be allowed to exist quietly is rejected outright. Dissent must be exposed, cataloged, eliminated. The men carrying out this work are not presented with grand speeches about cruelty. They are told they are protecting the nation, protecting stability, protecting the future. Each report filed, each interrogation conducted, is framed as a small act in service of something larger. This framing matters. It allows brutality to feel procedural rather than personal. Interrogation rooms reflect this philosophy. They are plain, efficient, designed to break resistance through repetition rather than spectacle. Questions are asked calmly. Answers are written down carefully. Silence is allowed to stretch until it becomes unbearable. Physical violence is present, but it is controlled, calculated, purposeful. Pain is a means, not an end. The SS studies what works. As more people disappear into detention, the camp system begins to expand and function. These early camps are not yet factories of death, but they are laboratories of control. Prisoners are subjected to routines designed to erase individuality. Names are replaced with numbers. Personal belongings vanish. Time loses meaning. Hunger becomes constant. The SS observes closely, refining methods of domination that require minimal resources and maximum compliance. Inside the organization, careers are built on efficiency. Officers who demonstrate initiative in identifying threats are rewarded. Those who hesitate are sidelined. The message is unmistakable. Advancement comes not from restraint, but from results. Results are measured in arrests, in broken networks, in silenced opposition. Outside the camps, German society adjusts. Many people welcome the apparent calm. Streets feel safer. Political violence declines. Newspapers report stability and renewal. The price of this calm is invisible to most, and those who glimpse it learn quickly not to speak. Fear does not need to be universal to be effective. It only needs to be selective and unpredictable. The SS exploits this dynamic expertly. High-profile arrests are staged occasionally, just enough to remind the public of consequences. Other actions remain hidden. The imbalance keeps everyone guessing. No one knows exactly where the line is, only that crossing it is dangerous. This uncertainty becomes a form of discipline more powerful than force. Within the Nazi hierarchy, the SS role grows increasingly indispensable. Party officials rely on its reports to make decisions. Leaders ask its officers for assessments of loyalty. The SS becomes the regime's nervous system, transmitting signals of threat and opportunity. With each request for information, its influence deepens. This influence begins to reshape policy itself. Laws are drafted with input from SS intelligence. Categories of enemies are formalized. Communists, social democrats, Jews, Roma, so-called socials. Labels multiply. Each label justifies surveillance. Each classification narrows the definition of belonging. The SS helps translate ideology into administration. For the men enforcing these categories, distance becomes protection. They rarely see the full consequences of their work. One officer writes a report. Another signs an order. Another executes an arrest. Another oversees detention. Responsibility is fragmented. Guilt dissolves into procedure. Everyone plays a part, and no one feels fully accountable. The organization's internal language reflects this shift. People are discussed as cases. Neighborhoods as problem areas. Communities as risk factors. Dehumanization is subtle, incremental, bureaucratic. It does not require hatred, only detachment. The SS perfects this detachment, teaching its members to see themselves as instruments rather than agents. As the machinery tightens, resistance becomes increasingly isolated. Underground networks struggle to survive under constant observation. One arrest leads to another. One confession exposes dozens. Fear fractures trust. The SS understands that repression works best when it turns people against one another. Informants are rewarded quietly. Betrayal becomes survival. Inside the camps, conditions worsen deliberately. Scarcity is engineered. Privileges are dangled and withdrawn. Prisoners are encouraged to police themselves. The SS observes how hierarchy emerges even among the imprisoned, how power replicates itself under pressure. These lessons will prove invaluable later. By now, the SS no longer sees itself as merely enforcing Nazi rule. It believes it is shaping the moral architecture of the state. Loyalty is no longer optional. Obedience is no longer temporary. The idea that the SS stands above ordinary law becomes internalized. Orders are not questioned because they are seen as inherently justified. Germany's old legal institutions still exist, but they feel hollow. Judges defer. Prosecutors cooperate. The appearance of legality masks its absence. The SS does not abolish the law. It renders it irrelevant. Justice becomes whatever maintains order as defined by ideology. This transformation is not sudden enough to provoke mass outrage. It is slow, methodical, and cloaked in language of protection and necessity. Each step feels reasonable in isolation. Together, they create something unprecedented. A system where surveillance, policing, and detention operate seamlessly under one command, insulated from accountability. As the decade advances, the SS looks beyond political opponents. Its gaze widens. Entire populations are assessed not by actions, but by identity. The tools built to silence dissent are repurposed to manage difference itself. The question shifts from who resists to who belongs. The machinery is now sophisticated, flexible, and proven. It has crushed opposition without destabilizing the state. It has conditioned society to accept disappearance as normal. It has trained its personnel to execute cruelty without passion. What remains is scale. The SS has learned how to watch a nation. Soon, it will decide who within that nation is allowed to exist. Power changes how a man walks into a room. It straightens his spine. It slows his movements. It convinces him that the space belongs to him before he speaks a word. By the time the SS finishes binding surveillance, policing, and detention into a single system, its leaders no longer behave like servants of the state. They behave like custodians of it. Not representatives, not officials, custodians, men who believe the nation has been placed in their care, and that care requires firmness, distance, and the willingness to act without sentiment. Germany in these years feels calmer on the surface. The shouting has faded. The street battles have thinned. Political posters remain on walls, but fewer hands tear them down at night. Shops reopen. Trains run on time. Newspapers speak of renewal and discipline. Many people breathe easier, mistaking silence for peace. They do not see the deeper transformation unfolding behind closed doors, where the SS is no longer merely watching society, but reorganizing it. Inside SS headquarters, the atmosphere becomes increasingly formal. Corridors are quieter. Movements are precise. Conversations are clipped, purposeful. The organization begins to resemble a ministry rather than a militia. Ranks are clarified. Departments expand. Responsibilities are defined not by improvisation, but by regulation. What once depended on personal initiative now follows procedure. This shift matters. It gives cruelty permanence. The SS begins to absorb authority not by confrontation, but by replacement. Civil servants find themselves reporting to SS officers. Police departments receive new guidelines drafted elsewhere. Intelligence reports bypass traditional channels. The state still exists, but its nervous system now runs through black uniformed intermediaries. The distinction between party and government blurs until it becomes meaningless. Within this expanding structure, a belief takes hold that the SS is uniquely qualified to govern. Its members see themselves as disciplined in a way others are not, ideologically reliable where others are compromised, willing to do what must be done when others hesitate. This belief is reinforced constantly through internal messaging, training, and ritual. Pride and duty intertwine. To belong to the SS is to belong to the future. That future is imagined in racial terms. The SS leadership embraces the idea that society must be engineered, not merely administered. Populations are to be classified, improved, protected, or removed. These concepts are discussed not as moral questions, but as technical challenges. Charts are drawn, categories defined. The language of biology replaces the language of politics. Human beings become variables. Marriage regulations are tightened. Relationships are encouraged or discouraged based on ancestry. Children are no longer just family members. They are assets of the state. The SS presents itself as the guardian of bloodlines, tasked with preserving and strengthening the nation over generations. This long-term thinking sets it apart from other institutions obsessed with short-term stability. The SS plans for a century. Inside training halls, recruits are taught to see themselves as more than employees. They are initiated into an order. History is rewritten to place them at the center of a heroic lineage stretching back through imagined ancestors. Loyalty is framed as sacred. Obedience is elevated beyond discipline into virtue. To doubt an order is to doubt destiny itself. As this internal culture hardens, the SS begins to view other institutions with thinly veiled contempt. Judges are seen as weak, politicians as unreliable. The military is bound by outdated codes of honor. Only the SS, its leaders believe, understands the true nature of the struggle ahead. Only it is willing to act without restraint. This conviction drives expansion. New offices appear dedicated to population policy, racial research, and internal security. Each office feeds information into the others. Surveillance data informs arrest decisions. Arrests feed the camp system. Camp outcomes generate new intelligence. The system becomes self-reinforcing. Every action justifies the next. The concentration camps change in character during this period. No longer temporary holding sites, they become permanent institutions. Their administration grows more complex. Commandants are appointed based on reliability rather than brutality alone. Guards are trained not just to punish, but to maintain order efficiently. Prisoners are sorted, categorized, assigned roles. Control replaces chaos. Life inside these camps is deliberately structured to erase resistance. Days begin before dawn. Roll calls stretch endlessly in cold air. Hunger is constant. Punishment is arbitrary. The SS observes how routine crushes spirit more effectively than violence alone. It learns that predictability, when paired with uncertainty, is devastating. Prisoners never know what rule they have broken, only that they are always close to breaking one. Outside the camps, the SS tightens its grip on information. Media is monitored. Cultural institutions are pressured to conform. Teachers, artists, and intellectuals are evaluated for reliability. Those who resist quietly find themselves excluded, surveilled, or detained. The goal is not merely silence, but alignment. Society must not only obey, it must internalize. Within the SS, success breeds ambition. Leaders begin to imagine roles beyond internal security. Economic influence expands. SS-owned enterprises appear, staffed by forced labor. Resources flow through the organization, enriching it materially as well as politically. This economic base increases independence. The SS is no longer reliant on state budgets alone. It is becoming self-sustaining. This autonomy alters internal dynamics. Loyalty to the organization deepens as careers, status, and wealth become tied to its success. Corruption emerges, but it is tolerated so long as it does not threaten discipline. Brutality increases, but but it is framed as necessity. The SS begins to reward results above all else. As Germany's foreign ambitions grow, the SS positions itself carefully. It does not challenge the military directly. Instead, it embeds itself alongside it. Intelligence units accompany troop movements. Security detachments follow advances. The SS ensures that wherever German power extends, its own presence follows close behind. The language used to justify this expansion becomes increasingly abstract. Threats are described in collective terms. Enemies are no longer individuals, but groups. Whole categories of people are labeled dangerous by nature rather than action. This shift is crucial. It removes the need for evidence. Identity becomes guilt. Inside SS offices, maps cover walls. Borders are traced. Populations are marked. The idea of relocation is discussed casually. Entire communities are treated as logistical challenges. The SS does not yet possess the means to act on these ideas fully, but it is preparing. Plans are drafted. Scenarios imagined. Infrastructure assessed. German society continues to adjust. Many people sense that something is wrong, but few understand the scale. The system feels distant, abstract, bureaucratic. Violence is hidden. The SS does not parade its cruelty. It professionalizes it. This professionalism makes resistance harder. It is difficult to protest paperwork. The organization's leaders begin to speak openly of permanence. The SS is not meant to dissolve once stability is achieved. It is meant to endure as the backbone of the new order. Its members are encouraged to see themselves as guardians not just of the present, but of the future world Germany will dominate. This belief transforms fear into confidence. The SS no longer worries about legitimacy. It assumes it. Laws are tools. Institutions are instruments. Morality is subordinate to mission. The organization has crossed another threshold, one less visible but more dangerous than the last. The machinery is now vast, disciplined, and ideologically unified. It controls information, coercion, detention, and increasingly, labor and resources. It has learned how to bend society without breaking it, how to normalize absence, how to make obedience feel natural. What remains unresolved is scale. The system works within Germany. It maintains order. It silences opposition. It reshapes behavior. But the ambitions driving it extend far beyond national borders. The SS has built a framework designed not just to control a society, but to transform entire populations. As Europe edges closer to war, the organization stands ready. It has perfected the art of domination in peacetime. Soon, it will test that art in conditions far more brutal, far more permissive, and far more deadly. War does not arrive as an explosion. It arrives as permission. Permission to do openly what was once done quietly. Permission to remove limits that once had to be justified. Permission to turn plans into action. By the time Europe edges toward conflict, the SS no longer asks whether it has the right to intervene. It assumes it. Years of preparation have stripped hesitation away. What remains is readiness. Germany's expansion begins cautiously, then accelerates. Each foreign success reinforces the belief that force works, that restraint is weakness, that destiny favors those who move first. The SS follows this expansion like a shadow, slipping behind advancing power, embedding itself into newly seized spaces. It does not arrive waving flags. It arrives with lists, with folders, with categories already defined long before the borders move. In occupied territories, the atmosphere is thick with confusion. New rules appear overnight. Old authorities vanish. Police uniforms change insignia, but not always personnel. Some local officials cooperate instinctively, hoping accommodation will spare them. Others resist quietly and disappear just as quietly. The SS watches these reactions closely. Occupation becomes a test environment, a place where theories of control can be applied without restraint. The language used to justify SS action grows colder, more abstract. Security measures, pacification, population management. Entire communities are described as unstable, unreliable, dangerous by nature. The distinction between civilian and enemy begins to dissolve. Identity itself becomes a liability. The SS no longer needs to prove guilt. It needs only to assert risk. Behind the scenes, coordination between the SS and the military tightens. Officially, their roles are distinct. In practice, boundaries blur. Military victories create openings. SS units move in immediately, securing rear areas, identifying targets, eliminating perceived threats. The front line becomes not just a place of combat, but a gateway to social engineering. Inside SS command rooms, maps cover walls in overlapping layers. Rail lines, population centers, ethnic distributions, economic resources. Everything is connected. Everything is measurable. The SS treats territory not as land, but as a system to be reorganized. The human cost is not ignored. It is calculated. The camps, once primarily domestic instruments of repression, begin to change purpose. Prisoners from occupied territories arrive in growing numbers. Languages mix. Fear deepens. The SS adapts quickly, refining classification systems to process larger, more diverse populations. Experience gained from breaking political opponents is now applied to entire peoples. At the same time, mobile units are formed with a new clarity of mission. These men are trained not for arrest, but for elimination. They are taught to see killing as a necessary step in securing conquered land. Orders are phrased carefully, wrapped in bureaucratic language that obscures their final meaning. The men carrying them out understand anyway. The work is direct, intimate, brutal. The first mass killings unfold in forests, fields, and ravines. There are no walls, no machines, just men, weapons, and victims forced to stand at the edge of freshly dug earth. The sounds are unforgettable. Shots echo and then fade. Bodies fall. Silence returns, heavy and unnatural. The SS records these actions methodically, reporting numbers upward, as if accounting for supplies. Yet even within the SS, unease spreads. Not moral resistance, but psychological strain. The killers are human, and the work leaves marks. Drinking increases. Discipline frays. Some commanders complain quietly about efficiency, about morale, about sustainability. This discomfort does not slow the process. It refines it. Leadership begins searching for methods that remove proximity. Killing must be scaled up, streamlined, distanced. The solution is not to stop, but to innovate. Bureaucracy responds to trauma not with compassion, but with engineering. The SS begins to imagine death as something that can be managed like production. Meanwhile, ghettos are established in cities across occupied lands. Entire populations are sealed off behind walls and checkpoints. Hunger becomes policy. Disease spreads deliberately. The SS observes how deprivation weakens resistance, how isolation fractures solidarity. These spaces become holding pens, temporary solutions while larger plans mature. Inside Germany, propaganda works overtime. War is framed as defense. Expansion as necessity. Enemies are portrayed as existential threats. The SS benefits from this atmosphere, gaining broader acceptance for actions that once would have been unthinkable. Fear unites. Hatred simplifies. Complexity disappears. The SS internal culture hardens further under wartime conditions. Obedience is no longer framed as virtue alone, but as survival. Orders are issued faster. Doubt is eliminated. The organization becomes more insular, more convinced of its own righteousness. External criticism is dismissed as ignorance or betrayal. As operations expand eastward, the scale of violence increases dramatically. Entire villages are erased. Families vanish overnight. The SS refines techniques of intimidation designed to paralyze surrounding populations. Public executions, collective punishments, demonstrations of overwhelming force. Terror becomes a language understood instantly. The administrative side keeps pace. Transport schedules are coordinated. Supplies allocated. Prisoner flows tracked. The SS begins to integrate civilian infrastructure into its operations. Railways, factories, warehouses. The machinery of modern society is repurposed to serve destruction. Within the camps, conditions deteriorate further. Overcrowding becomes extreme. Food rations shrink. Labor demands intensify. Prisoners are worked until collapse, then replaced. The SS treats this as efficiency. The camps become engines, extracting value from suffering before discarding what remains. Doctors enter the system, not as healers, but as evaluators. Fitness is assessed. Usefulness is measured. Those deemed unproductive are removed. Medicine becomes another tool of selection. The language remains clinical. The outcome is lethal. The SS leadership begins to speak openly of final solutions. The phrase is deliberately vague, flexible enough to mean many things publicly and one thing privately. Plans are drafted for permanent facilities designed solely for killing. Locations are chosen based on transport access and secrecy. Construction begins quietly. As these plans advance, resistance becomes almost impossible. The SS controls information, movement, and force. Entire regions fall under its influence. Local collaborators are recruited. Others are eliminated. The system adapts to every obstacle, absorbing setbacks without altering direction. Within the organization, promotions reward ruthlessness. Success is measured in numbers processed, areas secured, threats neutralized. Humanity is no longer a factor. The SS has fully embraced its role as executor of ideology. The distance between belief and action has vanished. The war provides cover for everything. Destruction is expected. Death is normalized. In this environment, the SS actions blend into the broader catastrophe. Outsiders struggle to grasp the deliberate nature of violence. It looks like chaos. It is anything but. As Europe burns, the SS stands at the center of a system it spent years building. Surveillance, policing, camps, mobile killing units, bureaucracy, ideology. All are now fused. All operate toward the same goal. What once required justification now requires only coordination. The organization has crossed into a new phase. It is no longer testing methods or consolidating power. It is executing a vision at continental scale. The framework built in peacetime now reveals its true purpose. And the most deadly phase has not yet begun. Killing at scale creates a problem its planners do not expect. It is not moral hesitation. It is logistics. It is time. It is manpower. It is the strain placed on those ordered to carry it out face to face. By the time the SS has spent months executing mass shootings across occupied territory, it understands something fundamental. Murder done up close leaves residue, not just in the ground, but in the men. In a system that depends on constant violence, cannot afford unpredictability, exhaustion, or breakdown. Reports move upward through the hierarchy with clinical language masking unease. Commanders speak of efficiency, of psychological fatigue, of discipline issues, of alcohol, of men struggling to continue. None of this is framed as a reason to stop. It is framed as a technical obstacle. And technical obstacles invite technical solutions. The SS begins thinking in terms it knows best. Processes, throughput, distance. If killing can be separated from the killer, it can be accelerated. If death can be organized rather than improvised, it can be controlled. The question shifts from whether people must die to how they can be removed with maximum efficiency and minimal disruption to the system doing the removing. The answer begins to take shape not as a single decision, but as a convergence. Ideas circulate between offices, camps, occupied administrations. Experiments are discussed quietly. The language is deliberately indirect. Special treatment, resettlement, evacuation. Each phrase means less than it appears to, and more than anyone outside the system understands. At the center of this transformation is infrastructure. Railways that once carried commuters and goods are studied anew. Timetables are adjusted. Freight cars are reassigned. The SS understands that modern transportation can solve problems that bullets cannot. Trains can move thousands where trucks move hundreds. They can deliver human beings to places designed not for detention, but for disappearance. Existing camps begin to change character. No longer just sites of punishment or forced labor, they become nodes in a larger network. New facilities are designed with singular purpose. Their locations are chosen for isolation, secrecy, and access to rail lines. Construction proceeds quietly, overseen by men who understand precisely what these places are meant to do. Inside planning rooms, blueprints are unrolled. Flow is discussed. Entry points, holding areas, disposal. Nothing is left to chance. The SS treats death as an engineering problem. Each step must be optimized. Delays eliminated. Bottlenecks removed. Human beings are reduced to units moving through a system designed to absorb them completely. The first transports arrive under heavy guard. The journey itself is part of the process. Crammed into sealed cars, deprived of water, air, and space, many do not survive to arrival. Those who do emerge disoriented, weakened, terrified. The SS exploits this confusion deliberately. Speed becomes critical. People must not have time to understand where they are or what is about to happen. Selection begins immediately. A glance, a gesture, a decision made in seconds that determines life or death. Those deemed useful are sent one way, the rest another. Families are split. Parents separated from children. The noise is overwhelming. Orders shouted. Dogs barking. Whistles blowing. The SS maintains control through relentless motion. Stillness would allow comprehension. Comprehension would invite resistance. The killing process itself is designed to be impersonal. Gas replaces bullets. Enclosed spaces replace open fields. The SS convinces itself this is more humane, less traumatic for the perpetrators, more efficient, less visible. The victims are told they are being showered. Deception is built into the architecture. Signs are placed. Pipes installed. Normality is simulated long enough to prevent panic. When death comes, it comes silently at first, then violently. The air fills with bodies pressing against one another. Time stretches, then stops. When doors are opened, the work resumes immediately. Bodies are removed, teeth extracted, hair cut, valuables collected. Nothing is wasted. Everything is categorized. Even death is sorted. This process repeats day after day, transport after transport. The SS measures success not in ideology, but in numbers processed. Reports list figures with mechanical precision. Thousands per day, tens of thousands per month. The system scales upward with terrifying speed. What once required months of shooting now takes hours. Inside the camps, forced labor expands in parallel. Those spared immediate death are worked relentlessly. Factories rise alongside crematoria. Quarries consume bodies as surely as gas chambers. The SS extracts value from prisoners until they collapse, then replaces them without hesitation. Life becomes a resource to be depleted. Doctors play a central role. They stand at selections. They determine who lives temporarily and who dies immediately. Medical language cloaks these decisions. Fitness, productivity, efficiency. The profession meant to preserve life becomes a tool for managing death. The SS values this expertise. It gives murder scientific legitimacy. Within the organization, resistance does not appear in the way outsiders imagine. There are no mass refusals, no widespread rebellions. Instead, there is adaptation. Men grow accustomed. Procedures become routine. What once shocked becomes expected. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through repetition. Those who excel are promoted. Those who falter are replaced. The system selects for compliance. Career advancement depends on results. Compassion is not punished explicitly, but it is incompatible with success. Over time, it disappears. Outside the camps, the war rages on. Cities burn. Front lines shift. News of mass death filters through in fragments, rumors, half-understood reports. Many cannot grasp the scale. Others choose not to. The SS benefits from this disbelief. Genocide hides behind the enormity of war itself. The bureaucratic language grows thicker. Euphemisms multiply. Documents speak of special actions and final solutions. Each phrase distances the writer from the act. Each signature pushes responsibility downward. The system is designed so that no single person feels fully accountable. Everyone participates. No one owns the outcome. As operations continue, the SS refines methods further. Killing times are reduced. Disposal accelerated. Evidence minimized. Ashes spread. Records are destroyed selectively. Secrecy remains important, not because the SS doubts its actions, but because control requires ignorance among those outside the system. The psychological transformation of the organization is nearly complete. The SS no longer sees itself as breaking norms. It believes it is fulfilling destiny. The scale of the operation reinforces this belief. Only something righteous, it tells itself, could require such vast effort. Inside the camps, prisoners sense the truth long before they can articulate it. The smell hangs constantly in the air. Sweet, acrid, unmistakable. Smoke rises day and night. Ash settles on everything. Time loses meaning. Hope becomes dangerous. Survival depends on luck, compliance, and invisibility. The SS watches this suffering without reflection. It has learned to see bodies not as people, but as obstacles, resources, or waste. Language has completed its work. Dehumanization is total. As the system expands, its appetite grows. New groups are added to the lists. Categories widen. Criteria shift. What began with political opponents now consumes entire populations. The logic is relentless. If killing is justified for some, it can be justified for more. Transport networks strain under the volume. Schedules tighten. Delays become unacceptable. The SS pushes the rail system to its limits, prioritizing death over military supply when necessary. This choice reveals the organization's true priorities more clearly than any speech. Inside leadership circles, there is no debate about direction, only about optimization. The moral question was settled long ago. What remains is execution. The SS has become a machine, and machines do not question their function. Yet even machines produce friction. Rumors spread among civilians. Resistance movements gather evidence. Foreign governments receive reports they struggle to believe. The SS responds with more secrecy, more brutality, more speed. Exposure becomes another problem to be managed. As months pass, the camps reach an unimaginable scale. Millions are processed. Entire cultures vanish. Languages fall silent. Names disappear from records. The SS tracks it all meticulously, even as it erases the people behind the numbers. The organization has now achieved what it spent years preparing for: a fully integrated system of surveillance, transportation, forced labor, and mass killing. Every component supports the others. Remove one, and the rest adapt. This is the moment when genocide ceases to be an episode and becomes an industry. When murder is no longer an act, but a function. The SS does not celebrate this openly. It does not need to. Success is evident in the smoothness of operation. As the war grinds on, cracks will appear. Resources will tighten. Enemies will advance. The system will be tested under pressure it was never designed to withstand indefinitely. But for now, it operates with horrifying effectiveness. The organization that once guarded a podium has built a world where death moves on schedule. And it is not finished yet. The machine does not pause to consider what it has become. It measures only output, resistance, delay. Once killing is industrialized, the question is no longer how to begin, but how to sustain. By the time the SS perfects its extermination system, it faces a new challenge, one it did not anticipate when it designed death as a process. Total domination requires more than murder. It requires labor. It requires profit. It requires the complete extraction of value from every human body before it is destroyed. The war is consuming resources at a staggering rate. Factories run day and night. Weapons, uniforms, ammunition, vehicles, concrete, steel. Everything is scarce. Everything is demanded immediately. Germany's economy strains under the pressure of total war, and the SS sees opportunity where others see crisis. Millions of prisoners sit behind wire and walls, weakened, expendable, already stripped of rights. To the SS, they are not mouths to feed, but hands to use. The camps shift again, subtly but decisively. Killing remains central, but now it is paired with production. Entire industrial zones rise beside barbed wire. Smokestacks multiply, not only from crematoria, but from factories worked by prisoners who will never be paid and never leave. The SS positions itself as indispensable to the war economy, supplying labor no one else can provide at such scale or cost. Inside SS offices, contracts are drawn up. Companies negotiate access to prisoners as if ordering raw materials. Quotas are discussed. Output targets set. The value of a human life is calculated in hours of labor remaining. Once productivity declines below usefulness, selection intervenes. Death is no longer just ideological. It is economically timed. This integration of forced labor reshapes the internal culture of the SS. Efficiency becomes obsession. Guards are trained not just to punish, but to maintain productivity. Beatings are calibrated. Starvation is adjusted to keep prisoners alive just long enough to work. Medical care exists only to return bodies to labor. Mercy has no place in this calculus. Doctors refine their role further. They inspect prisoners not to heal, but to assess durability. Bodies are examined like machines nearing failure. Those deemed reparable are patched up just enough to continue. Those beyond recovery are sent elsewhere. Selection becomes routine, frequent, invisible to the outside world. The camps themselves expand outward, spawning satellite sites near mines, factories, construction projects. Prisoners are marched out daily under armed guard, their wooden shoes scraping frozen ground, their breath visible in the cold air. They work until hands bleed, until backs bend permanently, until exhaustion becomes their natural state. Many collapse and are dragged aside, replaced without comment. The SS records everything. Work hours, output levels, death rates. The data informs policy. If a group dies too quickly, rations are adjusted slightly. If productivity drops, punishments increase. The system fine-tunes suffering with the precision of a laboratory experiment. This economic empire gives the SS unprecedented autonomy. It controls labor, production, and profit streams independent of civilian ministries. Its leaders sit at the intersection of ideology and industry, wielding power that extends beyond terror into material dominance. This financial independence deepens loyalty within the organization. Careers, wealth, and influence now depend directly on the continuation of the system. Outside the camps, occupied territories are reorganized to feed this machine. Ghettos are liquidated not only for ideological reasons, but because bodies are needed elsewhere. Trains move relentlessly, carrying human cargo to sites where they will be worked, sorted, and ultimately destroyed. The rail system becomes a circulatory network, pumping life inward only to drain it completely. The SS frames this expansion as necessity. War demands sacrifice. Enemies must serve before they die. This logic spreads quickly within the organization, insulating it from doubt. Prisoners are no longer victims. They are contributors, however unwilling. Their suffering is reframed as utility. Inside the camps, the psychological landscape grows even darker. Prisoners are forced to participate in the system that is killing them. Some are assigned roles overseeing others. Some are made to sort belongings of the dead. Some are forced to assist in disposal. Survival becomes entangled with complicity. The SS understands this effect and exploits it deliberately. Guilt fractures solidarity. Hope corrodes trust. For the guards, distance increases. They no longer need to kill directly to feel powerful. They control schedules, rations, work assignments. They decide who rests and who collapses. Authority becomes routine. Cruelty becomes background noise. The SS perfects a form of domination that does not require constant violence, only constant control. As the war drags on, conditions worsen. Bombing disrupts supply lines. Food shortages spread. The SS responds by cutting rations further. Prisoners grow skeletal. Productivity drops. Instead of easing conditions, the SS accelerates turnover. New transports replace exhausted laborers. Death rates rise sharply. The system consumes bodies faster than ever. At the same time, secrecy intensifies. Evidence of mass killing must be hidden as the possibility of defeat grows more real. The SS orders the destruction of records, the dismantling of sites, the burning of bodies. Prisoners are forced to exhume mass graves and erase traces of earlier crimes. Once finished, they too are killed. Witnesses are liabilities. The machinery adapts to pressure with chilling efficiency. As Allied forces advance, camps are evacuated. Prisoners are marched across frozen roads, beaten if they fall behind, shot if they collapse. These death marches are not chaotic retreats. They are controlled movements designed to preserve labor and eliminate witnesses simultaneously. The SS values order even in collapse. Within the organization, cracks appear but do not widen into resistance. Some officers grow cynical. Others grow more brutal. Few question the mission itself. The system has trained them too well. Obedience has replaced reflection. Careerism overrides conscience. The language inside SS communications becomes increasingly detached. People are referred to as units. Losses are acceptable. Replacement is expected. The abstraction is complete. The organization has succeeded in stripping humanity not only from its victims, but from its own processes. As defeat looms closer, desperation sets in at the top. The SS tightens its grip, executing prisoners at accelerating rates to avoid liberation. Camps become scenes of chaos layered atop order, with transports arriving even as evacuation orders are issued. Contradictions pile up. The machine strains, but does not stop. Prisoners sense the shift before they understand it. Guards grow more erratic. Violence spikes. Rules change without explanation. Rumors spread of advancing armies, of freedom, of annihilation. Hope becomes dangerous again. Many die within sight of liberation. The SS leadership begins planning its own survival. Escape routes are discussed. False identities prepared. Stolen valuables hidden. The organization that once prided itself on permanence now anticipates disappearance. Loyalty erodes upward, even as it remains absolute downward. Yet even in these final months, the system continues to function. Trains run. Orders are issued. Selections continue. The machinery does not know how to stop. It was never designed to. When camps are finally overrun, the scale of what has occurred begins to surface. Survivors stagger into daylight, skeletal, silent, eyes hollowed by what they have seen and endured. The smell lingers everywhere. Ash coats the ground. Silence replaces the hum of industry. The SS has extracted everything it can. Labor, wealth, life. It leaves behind ruins that defy comprehension and a record that it attempted desperately to erase. But systems leave traces. Paper burns, but memory does not. Ash scatters, but numbers remain. What began as an apparatus of control has become an empire of death and labor, inseparable from the modern economy that sustained it. The SS proved that genocide could be profitable, organized, and bureaucratically elegant. It fused ideology with industry and called the result necessity. As the war closes in, the organization faces a reckoning it cannot process the way it processed everything else. Accountability cannot be scheduled. Guilt cannot be delegated. The machine will soon be dismantled by force, but the question of responsibility will not be so easily resolved. The SS built a system that turned human beings into fuel, and even as its power begins to collapse, the damage it has done will continue long after its structures fall away. Collapse rarely comes as a single moment. It arrives unevenly, like rot spreading through a structure that still looks solid from the outside. By the time the SS senses that the war is turning against Germany, it does not respond with doubt or restraint. It responds with acceleration. When systems built for total control begin to fail, they do not soften. They harden. They squeeze tighter. They destroy what they can no longer manage. The signs are impossible to ignore. Reports from the front grow darker. Maps are redrawn with shrinking confidence. Supply lines strain, then snap. Allied bombing turns cities into rubble and factories into smoke. The certainty that once defined SS planning gives way to urgency, then desperation. Yet the organization does not slow its operations. It intensifies them. Killing does not pause for defeat. Forced labor does not pause for retreat. The machine is too large, too embedded to reverse course. Inside the camps, conditions deteriorate rapidly. Food deliveries become irregular. Rations shrink to starvation levels. Medical supplies vanish almost entirely. Prisoners are worked harder, not less, as the SS tries to extract final value from bodies already close to collapse. Death rates surge. Piles of corpses grow faster than they can be removed. The smell becomes overwhelming, clinging to everything, seeping into clothing, skin, memory. Guards grow more volatile. Discipline fractures under pressure. Some lash out indiscriminately. Others retreat into mechanical obedience, following orders without emotion, without curiosity. Violence becomes erratic, unpredictable. A prisoner can survive one day only to be beaten to death the next for no reason at all. Arbitrary cruelty replaces calculated control. The SS leadership understands that the evidence of its crimes is now a liability. Camps that once operated in secrecy must now be erased. Orders are issued to destroy records, dismantle facilities, burn bodies, scatter ashes. Prisoners are forced to exhume mass graves dug years earlier, their decomposing contents hauled up and incinerated. The work is brutal, nauseating, relentless. When it is finished, those prisoners are killed too. Witnesses cannot be allowed to remain. This effort to erase the past consumes enormous resources, even as resources vanish. The SS prioritizes secrecy over survival. Trains that could move troops or supplies are diverted to transport prisoners away from advancing armies. Killing becomes less about ideology and more about concealment. The goal is no longer only extermination, but silence. As Allied forces draw closer, evacuation orders ripple through the camp system. Entire populations are marched out under armed guard, driven across frozen roads, through forests and ruined towns. These death marches are scenes of controlled chaos. Prisoners stumble on swollen feet, wrapped in rags, coughing blood. Those who fall behind are shot without hesitation. The sound of gunfire punctuates the endless shuffle of exhausted bodies. Civilians along the routes watch in stunned silence. Some avert their eyes. Some offer scraps of food and are beaten away. Others are forced to participate, to supply carts, to dig graves. The SS spreads responsibility outward, implicating anyone it can. Guilt becomes collective, diffuse, harder to confront later. Within the organization, loyalty begins to fracture subtly, not downward, where obedience remains absolute, but upward, where self-preservation creeps in. Officers begin preparing escape routes. False identities are created. Uniforms are hidden. Stolen valuables are buried or smuggled. The SS that once preached sacrifice now plans survival for itself. Corruption, long tolerated, becomes rampant. Camp commandants hoard food and alcohol while prisoners starve. Guard trade favors for valuables taken from the dead. Authority is abused openly. The moral vacuum inside the organization expands as fear replaces certainty. Ideology gives way to instinct. Yet even in this chaos, the SS continues to function. Orders are issued. Reports are filed. Selections continue. The bureaucratic reflex remains intact. Men who know the war is lost still carry out killings with methodical precision. The system does not require belief anymore. It runs on habit. Inside the camps, Prisoners sense the change before they can name it. Something is breaking. Guards are nervous. Violence spikes without warning. Rules shift constantly. Rumors spread of liberation, of annihilation, of both at once. Hope becomes a dangerous emotion. To believe too strongly is to invite despair when it is crushed. As evacuations accelerate, camps become sites of chaos layered over order. Trains arrive with new prisoners, even as others are marched out. Selection lines form amid evacuation preparations. The SS attempts to maintain structure while everything collapses around it. Contradictions pile up, but the machinery keeps moving. In some places, commanders choose mass execution over evacuation. Prisoners are lined up and shot in pits hastily dug. In others, gas chambers operate until the last possible moment. The SS calculates how long it can continue killing before retreat becomes unavoidable. Death is scheduled against the advance of enemy forces. The camps left behind are scenes of horror frozen in time. Barracks filled with corpses. Survivors too weak to stand. Evidence scattered everywhere despite desperate attempts at concealment. When Allied soldiers finally enter these spaces, they are confronted with a reality that defies language. The SS has fled, but its work remains. Within the collapsing Reich, the SS turns inward. Rivalries intensify. Blame is shifted. Orders contradict one another. Some leaders attempt to distance themselves from the worst crimes, claiming ignorance, claiming obedience, claiming necessity. The language that once justified everything now fractures under scrutiny. As Berlin itself comes under siege, the SS fights with fanatic determination in some places and evaporates in others. Units surrender or melt into civilian populations. Others fight to the last, clinging to the belief that annihilation is preferable to accountability. The organization no longer presents a unified front. It splinters under pressure. The camps that are liberated reveal not only the scale of murder, but the depth of planning behind it. Survivors speak of schedules, quotas, procedures, of selections conducted with calm efficiency, of guards who treated death as routine. The myth that these crimes were the result of chaos or desperation collapses immediately. This was order. This was policy. As news spreads, the world struggles to comprehend what it is seeing. Photographs circulate. Testimonies accumulate. Numbers grow staggering. Millions dead. Entire communities erased. The SS, once shrouded in secrecy, is exposed as the central instrument of this destruction. Its symbols become synonymous with terror. Yet accountability remains uncertain. Many SS members have vanished. Some have changed names. Others hide behind uniforms discarded at the right moment. The system that protected them for years now dissolves, leaving individuals to face consequences alone. Some will be captured. Many will not. Inside the ruins of camps and cities, the survivors confront a future that feels unreal. They have endured a system designed to erase them, and now that system is gone, but nothing has replaced what was taken. Families are gone. Homes destroyed. Identities shattered. Survival itself feels like a burden. The SS leaves behind not just bodies, but a blueprint, a demonstration of how modern institutions can be bent toward mass murder, how bureaucracy can mask cruelty, how obedience can be weaponized. These lessons do not vanish with defeat. They linger, waiting to be recognized or ignored. As the war ends, the organization that once saw itself as eternal dissolves in silence and denial. Its leaders scatter. Its files burn. Its crimes speak louder than any defense it can offer. The machinery has finally stopped, not because it chose to, but because it was forced to. What remains now is judgment, not just of individuals, but of systems, of how easily authority was surrendered, of how thoroughly cruelty was normalized, of how an entire society learned to look away while destruction was organized in its name. The SS is collapsing, but the reckoning has only begun. The war ends not with clarity, but with noise and confusion, with rubble still smoking and people moving through ruins without direction. The SS does not disappear in a single moment. It dissolves unevenly, fragment by fragment, as the structures that once sustained it collapse under the weight of defeat. Some members flee in uniform, others shed it in alleyways and fields, burying symbols of authority beneath dirt and shame. What was once a unified apparatus fractures into individuals scrambling to survive a world that now knows what they built. For years, the SS had operated with absolute certainty. Orders flowed downward. Responsibility flowed nowhere. Now, for the first time, questions appear that cannot be silenced with force. Who ordered this? Who knew? Who benefited? The men who once spoke confidently of duty and destiny suddenly struggle to explain themselves. The language that protected them during the war fails them in peace. In occupied Germany, Allied forces move cautiously, encountering resistance in some places and surrender in others. They discover camps abandoned in haste, their gates hanging open, their barracks filled with the dead and the dying. Survivors stumble forward, skeletal and silent, their eyes reflecting a reality the outside world is unprepared to face. The SS is gone, but its presence is everywhere. In the ash on the ground, in the smell that lingers, in the absence of millions who will never return. Investigators begin the slow, horrifying work of documentation. They walk through offices where files were burned hastily, drawers left open, stamps still inked. They find meticulous records partially destroyed, numbers scrawled in margins, lists interrupted mid-sentence. The SS tried to erase itself, but bureaucracy leaves footprints. Paper curls, but memory does not vanish so easily. As evidence accumulates, the scale of the crime becomes undeniable. This was not chaos. It was coordination. It was not the excess of a few fanatics. It was the product of an institution that fused ideology with administration, cruelty with efficiency. The SS is identified not as an accessory to genocide, but as its engine. The world responds with disbelief, then anger, then an urgent need for justice. Trials are announced. Courts assembled. For the first time, men who once commanded fear must sit quietly and listen as their actions are read back to them in plain language. The uniforms are gone. The rituals meaningless. All that remains are questions. Inside courtrooms, the atmosphere is heavy, charged with tension that cannot be released. Survivors testify. Their voices shake, but they speak. They describe selections, beatings, transports, gas chambers, forced labor, death marches. Each account chips away at the defenses offered by the accused. Claims of ignorance collapse under detail. Claims of obedience crumble under evidence. The SS men on trial respond in familiar ways. They insist they were following orders, that they did not know the full scope. That responsibility lies elsewhere, higher up, beyond their reach. The system that once shielded them now traps them. Fragmented responsibility no longer protects. The court insists on individual accountability. Yet justice is incomplete from the start. The SS was vast, its members numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Only a fraction are ever tried. Many escape, slipping into post-war chaos, blending into displaced populations, assuming new identities. Some flee abroad, aided by networks that value loyalty over law. Others remain, living quietly among those who do not know who they were. This uneven reckoning leaves scars. Survivors watch as some perpetrators walk free. Families search for answers that never come. Entire communities struggle to rebuild in landscapes haunted by absence. The end of the SS does not restore what was destroyed. It only marks the point where destruction is acknowledged. As Germany rebuilds, there is pressure to forget, to move forward, to focus on recovery rather than reckoning. The SS becomes a symbol of a past many would rather distance themselves from. Discussions soften. Language becomes careful. Responsibility diffuses again, this time through silence rather than force. But silence is not erasure. The legacy of the SS lingers in institutions, in questions about obedience and authority, in debates about how ordinary people became instruments of extraordinary cruelty. Scholars dissect the organization not to understand monsters, but to understand systems. How loyalty was cultivated, how bureaucracy normalized murder, how modern structures made genocide possible. The SS had presented itself as an elite order, superior, disciplined, destined to rule. In its aftermath, that self-image is inverted. It becomes a warning, proof that efficiency without morality is deadly, that obedience without conscience is dangerous, that institutions designed to protect can be transformed into instruments of annihilation. For the survivors, the end of the SS does not bring closure. Trauma does not dissolve with victory. Memories persist, intrusive and relentless. Many struggle to speak of what they endured. Others devote their lives to testimony, determined that the system that tried to erase them will not succeed in erasing the truth. Across the world, memorials rise on the ruins of camps. Names are carved into stone. Numbers are recited. Education becomes a form of resistance against forgetting. The SS is studied not as an aberration, but as a case study in how modern societies can fail catastrophically. The organization that once prided itself on secrecy is now exposed in exhaustive detail. Its hierarchy mapped, its departments cataloged, its crimes documented. Yet understanding does not equate to immunity. The conditions that enable the SS are not unique to one time or place. Fear, resentment, obedience, ambition. These forces do not vanish with defeat. As decades pass, the SS recedes into history, but its lessons remain urgent. It showed how quickly institutions could be repurposed, how language could sanitize violence, how professionals could become perpetrators without seeing themselves as such. The danger lies not only in hatred, but in efficiency divorced from humanity. The men who once stood in black uniforms believed they were building order. They believed they were securing the future. Instead, they created one of the most comprehensive systems of destruction the world has ever known. Their downfall does not erase that achievement. It defines it. The end of the SS marks the collapse of an organization, but not the end of the questions it raises. How many people must participate for such a system to function? How many must look away? How easily responsibility can be passed downward until no one claims it. The war is over. The camps are liberated. The trials conclude. Sentences are handed down. Yet the true reckoning continues, carried forward by memory, by education, by the refusal to accept that such a system was inevitable. The SS is gone, but its shadow remains, stretching forward through history as a reminder of what happens when power is allowed to operate without restraint, when loyalty replaces conscience, and when order becomes more important than humanity. And the story does not end here. Memory does not arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, through fragments, through photographs discovered in drawers, through testimonies spoken years after the fact when silence finally becomes heavier than fear. After the collapse of the SS and the first wave of trials, the world does not immediately understand what it has just witnessed. The scale is too large, the system too complex. The instinct is to simplify, to reduce everything to a handful of villains and a finished chapter of history. But the truth resists closure. In the years that follow the war, Europe rebuilds itself physically faster than it rebuilds itself morally. Cities rise from rubble. Roads are repaired. Governments are reassembled. Yet beneath this visible recovery lies an unresolved tension. Millions are gone, and the mechanism that erased them was not an accident of war, but a functioning institution staffed by educated men who believed they were doing their jobs. This realization unsettles everything. The SS no longer exists as an organization, but its former members are everywhere. Some sit in prison cells awaiting judgment. Others walk free, blending into new lives as clerks, laborers, businessmen. They marry. They raise children. They attend church. The uniforms are gone, but the past has not disappeared with them. For survivors, this coexistence is unbearable. The people who administered suffering now shop in the same markets, live in the same towns, speak the same language of normalcy. Governments struggle with how much justice is possible and how much is politically convenient. The early trials establish principles, but they also expose limits. Evidence is overwhelming, yet incomplete. Witnesses are traumatized. Records are destroyed. Many perpetrators claim ignorance, distance, necessity. The same fragmentation of responsibility that enabled the SS to function now complicates accountability. Each man insists he was a small part of a larger machine. This argument forces a deeper question. If everyone was only a small part, who is responsible? The answer is uncomfortable. Responsibility does not rest only with leaders or executioners. It rests with systems that rewarded obedience, with institutions that normalized cruelty, with societies that tolerated exclusion and silence. The SS becomes less a singular evil and more a mirror reflecting what happens when power is insulated from conscience. As time passes, historians begin to trace the organization not just through events, but through structure. They examine how departments overlapped, how authority flowed, how information moved. They analyze memos, organizational charts, training manuals. What emerges is not chaos, but clarity. The SS was not merely violent. It was efficient. Its greatest strength was not hatred, but coordination. This realization reshapes how the Holocaust is understood. It was not an eruption of madness. It was a managed process. Decisions were made incrementally. Each step was justified as necessary, temporary, exceptional. Together, they formed a system that could commit genocide without requiring constant ideological fervor. Routine replaced passion. Procedure replaced reflection. The danger of this insight lies in its universality. The SS is no longer safely confined to history as an anomaly. Its methods are recognizable. Surveillance justified by security. Detention justified by order. Dehumanization justified by classification. These tools are not unique to one regime or one time. They exist wherever institutions prioritize control over dignity. Survivors understand this instinctively. Many dedicate their lives to testimony, not to dwell on suffering, but to explain how it happened. They speak not only of guards and violence, but of paperwork, schedules, selections, routines. They describe how horror became normal through repetition. Their accounts challenge the comforting belief that such crimes require monsters. They show instead how ordinary people adapt to extraordinary systems. Education becomes the battlefield of memory. Museums are built on former campsites. Documents are displayed. Names are read aloud. Students walk through barracks and stand in silence. The SS is presented not as an abstract evil, but as an organization that functioned through familiar roles. Administrators, engineers, doctors, clerks. The lesson is clear and unsettling. Atrocities do not require savagery alone. They require compliance. Resistance to this lesson appears almost immediately. Some argue that the past should be left alone. Others attempt to relativize the crimes, to contextualize them as products of war. Denial emerges, subtle at first, then more openly. Numbers are questioned. Intent is obscured. Responsibility is blurred again, this time through rhetoric rather than bureaucracy. Each wave of denial reinforces the importance of documentation. Archives expand. Testimonies are recorded. Scholars cross-reference records with survivor accounts. The SS is dissected again and again, not to sensationalize, but to understand. Every layer peeled back reveals how deeply embedded it was in the machinery of the state and society. The question of obedience becomes central. Why did so many comply? Fear explains some. Ambition explains others. Ideology explains many. But the most disturbing factor is normalization. Once violence becomes routine, once authority feels legitimate, resistance feels abnormal. The SS cultivated this environment deliberately. It rewarded those who adapted and sidelined those who hesitated. This insight reframes moral responsibility. Evil is no longer defined solely by intent, but by participation, by silence, by the decision to treat suffering as someone else's problem. The SS thrived because too many people accepted its authority as inevitable. They did not need to believe in its ideology. They needed only to adjust to its presence. As generations pass, distance threatens memory. The camps become historical sites rather than lived experiences. The faces in photographs feel remote. The danger shifts from forgetting facts to forgetting implications. The SS risks becoming a closed chapter instead of a cautionary framework. Yet each new crisis in the modern world revives uncomfortable parallels. Surveillance expands. Security rhetoric intensifies. Populations are categorized. Emergencies justify extraordinary measures. The lessons of the SS do not fade because the conditions that enabled it continue to arise in different forms. This does not mean history repeats itself mechanically. It means the same human tendencies reappear. The desire for order, the appeal of certainty, the relief of delegating responsibility upward. The SS demonstrated how these tendencies can be organized into something catastrophic. In the end, the legacy of the SS is not confined to its crimes. It lies in the clarity it offers about systems and choices. It shows how quickly institutions can be repurposed when fear overrides empathy. How professionalism can coexist with atrocity. How moral language can be replaced by technical language until nothing human remains. The organization that once operated in shadows is now illuminated from every angle. Its crimes cataloged, its structure exposed. Yet illumination alone is not protection. Understanding must be paired with vigilance. Memory must be active, not ceremonial. The SS believed it was building permanence. Instead, it built a warning, a demonstration of how modern power, when freed from restraint, can move from protection to domination to annihilation without ever breaking its own rules. The final question it leaves behind is not how such a system could exist then, but how easily similar systems could form again, if obedience is rewarded, if difference is feared, and if responsibility is allowed to dissolve into procedure. The story continues, not as history, but as choice. The passage of time does not dull the questions the SS leaves behind. It sharpens them. As decades move forward and the last perpetrators age into obscurity or death, the focus shifts again, away from individuals and back toward structure. The horror is no longer unfolding in real time, but its architecture remains visible, embedded in documents, testimonies, and the quiet gaps where answers should be. What emerges is an uncomfortable truth. The SS did not simply exploit chaos. It mastered normality. In the years after the war, scholars, investigators, and survivors return again and again to the same realization. The SS did not rely on constant rage or mass hysteria to function. It relied on routines, on schedules, on offices that opened in the morning and closed at night, on men who went home after work convinced they had fulfilled their duties. This banality becomes one of the most disturbing aspects of the system, because it suggests that extraordinary evil does not require extraordinary people. Files recovered from SS offices reveal an organization obsessed with clarity. Every role was defined, every task assigned, every report standardized. This clarity did not reduce violence. It enabled it. By breaking responsibility into small, manageable pieces, the SS ensured that no one ever felt fully accountable for the outcome. Each man could tell himself that someone else decided, someone else ordered, someone else killed. This fragmentation of responsibility becomes one of the SS' most enduring lessons. It shows how moral weight can be diluted through structure. When harm is distributed across departments, desks, and ranks, it becomes easier to deny ownership. The SS perfected this dispersion. Its members did not need to believe they were committing genocide. They needed only to believe they were performing their assigned function correctly. This insight forces a re-examination of obedience. For years, obedience was treated as an explanation, even an excuse. Orders were followed. Consequences were abstract. But the SS reveals something deeper. Obedience was not imposed reluctantly. It was cultivated. It was rewarded. It was framed as professionalism, as honor, as virtue. Disobedience was not merely punished. It was stigmatized. The SS trained its members to equate morality with loyalty. Right and wrong were no longer ethical categories, but hierarchical ones. What served the mission was right. What threatened it was wrong. This inversion did not require constant reinforcement once internalized. It became instinctive. Orders no longer needed justification. They carried their own legitimacy. This transformation of conscience did not occur overnight. It unfolded through repetition, through small compromises, through moments where refusal felt dangerous or pointless. Each compromise lowered the threshold for the next. The SS understood this process intuitively. It rarely demanded immediate extremes. It escalated gradually, allowing its members to adapt without confronting the full reality of their actions. The implications of this process extend far beyond one historical case. The SS demonstrates how institutions can reshape moral perception without overt coercion. When rules are clear, authority stable, and rewards predictable, people adjust. They redefine normal. They reinterpret responsibility. They accept outcomes they would have rejected under different conditions. This realization unsettles comfortable distinctions between perpetrators and bystanders. The SS did not operate in isolation. It relied on cooperation from rail workers, factory managers, clerks, engineers. Many were not members of the organization. They interacted with it as professionals fulfilling tasks. Each contribution seemed minor. Together, they formed a network that sustained mass murder. The post-war world struggles with how to integrate this understanding without collapsing into cynicism. If ordinary people can participate in such systems, where does accountability lie? The answer is not simple, but it is necessary. Responsibility exists not only in action, but in acceptance. Not only in orders given, but in silence maintained. This perspective reshapes how memory functions. Commemoration is no longer sufficient. Names and dates matter, but they do not address the mechanisms that made atrocity possible. The legacy of the SS demands analysis, not only mourning. It demands vigilance toward institutions that centralize power, obscure accountability, and normalize exclusion. As new generations encounter the history of the SS, the challenge becomes translation. How to convey the reality of a system that functioned efficiently while committing incomprehensible crimes. How to explain that the perpetrators were not constantly enraged or visibly monstrous. That many were methodical, calm, convinced of their own necessity. Education confronts this challenge directly. Classrooms, museums, and archives present the SS not as a collection of villains, but as an organization with departments, budgets, procedures. Students are asked to examine charts and documents, to follow decision chains, to see how violence moved through systems rather than erupting spontaneously. This approach is uncomfortable, but intentional. It removes the false comfort of distance. It shows that the danger lies not only in extreme ideology, but in ordinary processes divorced from ethical restraint. The SS becomes a case study in how modernity itself can be weaponized. Survivors often emphasize this point in their testimonies. They speak not only of brutality, but of efficiency, of how quickly suffering became routine, of how guards performed their duties with boredom rather than hatred. These details are difficult to absorb because they undermine the belief that evil must announce itself dramatically. The SS did not need to persuade its members to hate every victim personally. It needed only to convince them that victims were irrelevant to the task. Once that threshold was crossed, violence became procedural. Dehumanization was complete. As memory fades and history recedes, the temptation to compartmentalize the SS grows, to treat it as an isolated phenomenon, to reassure ourselves that its conditions no longer exist. But the structures it exploited remain familiar. surveillance justified by security, detention justified by order, categorization justified by efficiency. The lesson is not that these tools are inherently evil. It is that they become dangerous when removed from transparency, accountability, and moral scrutiny. The SS operated in secrecy, shielded from oversight, insulated by ideology. It answered to itself and to a leader who valued loyalty above restraint. These conditions allowed its worst impulses to flourish unchecked. The collapse of the SS did not dismantle these tools. It merely exposed their consequences. The post-war world inherited both the warning and the responsibility to heed it. That responsibility does not expire with time. It grows more urgent as distance increases. The story of the SS challenges societies to examine their own institutions critically, to ask who holds power, how it is justified, who is excluded, how dissent is treated. These questions are uncomfortable precisely because they are universal. The SS believed it was building order. It believed it was correcting chaos. It believed it was acting in the name of survival. These justifications appear again and again throughout history, attached to different ideologies, different targets. The specifics change. The logic remains. This continuity is what makes the SS more than a historical subject. It makes it a framework for understanding how systems can fail catastrophically while appearing functional. How violence can be hidden behind professionalism. How conscience can be outsourced to authority. As the final witnesses pass away, the burden of memory shifts entirely to institutions, educators, and individuals who did not experience the events firsthand. The danger is not that facts will disappear, but that meaning will erode. That the SS will be remembered only for what it did, not for how it did it. The how matters. It reveals that genocide does not require constant brutality. It requires permission structures, administrative clarity, and moral disengagement. The SS perfected all three. In the end, the most unsettling legacy of the SS is not its cruelty, but its effectiveness. It achieved its objectives with terrifying precision, not despite modern systems, but because of them. That is the lesson that refuses to fade. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it echoes. The SS leaves behind an echo that asks each generation the same question. When systems demand obedience, when authority discourages scrutiny, when efficiency eclipses empathy, what choices will be made? The answer is never predetermined. It is shaped by vigilance, by education, by the willingness to question what feels normal. The SS demonstrates what happens when that willingness disappears. The story does not end with destruction or judgment. It ends with responsibility, not only to remember what was done, but to recognize the conditions that allowed it, and to refuse them wherever they begin to form. And that responsibility, unlike the SS itself, does not belong to the past. The distance between history and the present is deceptive. It creates the illusion that what happened is sealed safely behind dates and ruins, locked away from the world that exists now. But the SS refuses to stay buried in the past, because its most important legacy is not physical. It is structural. Long after the uniforms were burned and the camps dismantled, the logic that sustained the organization continues to surface in new forms, in new places, wearing new language. As the 20th century moves forward, the SS becomes a reference point whenever societies confront the darker possibilities of power, not because it was uniquely cruel, but because it was uniquely organized. It demonstrated that modern institutions, when shielded from accountability, can produce outcomes more destructive than spontaneous violence ever could. This realization shifts the conversation away from hatred alone and towards systems, incentives, and obedience. The SS showed how ideology does not need to be constantly reinforced once it is embedded in routine. It does not need speeches every day. It needs procedures. It needs forms to be filled out. It needs meetings where decisions are framed as technical necessities rather than moral choices. Over time, this process dulls resistance. People stop asking why and focus only on how. This mechanism is visible in every stage of the organization's rise. Loyalty was not demanded through constant terror at first. It was cultivated through belonging, privilege, and purpose. Members were made to feel chosen, elevated above ordinary society. That sense of elevation created separation. Separation made cruelty easier. Once victims were defined as outside the moral community, their suffering no longer registered as a problem. The SS also demonstrated how fear does not need to be universal to be effective. It only needs to be unpredictable. By striking selectively, by making examples without explanation, it taught entire populations to self-regulate. People adjusted their behavior without being told. Silence became a survival strategy. Compliance became habitual. This dynamic persists wherever power is opaque and punishment arbitrary. The SS perfected it by combining surveillance with bureaucracy. People never knew exactly what was being watched or how decisions were made. That uncertainty bred caution, and caution bred obedience. Control became internal rather than enforced. In the post-war world, this insight becomes deeply unsettling. It suggests that preventing future atrocities requires more than condemning ideology. It requires scrutinizing how authority is exercised, how dissent is treated, how institutions respond to perceived threats. The SS was not sustained by belief alone. It was sustained by structure. One of the most enduring myths about the SS is that it required extraordinary fanaticism from all its members. In reality, many participated with minimal ideological passion. They adapted to expectations. They followed procedures. They learned what was rewarded and what was dangerous. Over time, this adaptation became identity. They no longer needed to believe fervently. They needed only to belong. This adaptability is what makes the SS so difficult to confine to history. It was not an aberration driven by madness. It was a system that rewarded conformity and punished deviation. Its methods are recognizable in any context where institutions prioritize efficiency over humanity and loyalty over accountability. The survivors understood this intuitively. When they spoke about their experiences, they often emphasized the ordinariness of their oppressors. The way guards complained about weather, the way administrators worried about schedules, the way doctors discussed selections in neutral tones. These details were not incidental. They revealed the true danger. Violence had become work. As time passes, this insight becomes central to how the SS is remembered by those determined to learn from it rather than simply condemn it. The organization is studied not to explain how hatred spreads, but to explain how indifference spreads, how people learn to tolerate what once would have revolted them. The SS also demonstrated how language can anesthetize conscience. Euphemisms replaced reality. Killing became resettlement. Extermination became solution. Victims became units. This linguistic shift did not merely hide truth from outsiders. It reshaped perception inside the organization. Once words lost their human reference, actions followed more easily. This pattern reappears whenever violence is bureaucratized, when harm is framed as policy, when suffering is described as collateral, when lives are reduced to statistics. The SS serves as a reminder that language is not neutral. It shapes what people are willing to do. The organization's collapse did not eliminate these dangers. It exposed them. It showed how quickly norms can shift when fear and authority align. It showed how easily responsibility can dissolve into hierarchy. These lessons resonate uncomfortably in a world that continues to grapple with surveillance, emergency powers, and the erosion of civil protections. The SS believed it was acting rationally. It believed it was preventing chaos. It believed that extreme measures were justified by extreme threats. These justifications appear again and again throughout history, attached to different enemies and different ideologies. The SS stands as proof that rationality alone is not a safeguard. Without ethical limits, it becomes a weapon. The question that follows is not whether such an organization could exist again. It is whether societies recognize the early signs when it begins to form. Those signs are rarely dramatic. They appear as administrative reforms, as security measures, as efficiency initiatives, as classifications designed to simplify complexity. The SS did not announce genocide at its inception. It announced order. It announced protection. It announced renewal. Each step felt incremental. Each step felt defensible. By the time the destination became undeniable, resistance was almost impossible. This gradualism is one of the most important aspects of the SS legacy. It teaches that vigilance must operate early, before systems harden and normalize. Waiting for obvious brutality is waiting too long. By then, the machinery is already in motion. The post-war world often comforted itself by emphasizing the uniqueness of Nazi ideology, as if that alone explained the SS. But ideology does not function in isolation. It requires institutions willing to implement it, people willing to administer it, and societies willing to tolerate it. The SS provided all three. As newer generations engage with this history, the challenge is not to feel horror, but to feel responsibility. Horror fades. Responsibility endures. The SS is not merely a symbol of past evil. It is a case study in how evil becomes possible. The organization's greatest crime was not only the destruction it inflicted, but the demonstration it provided. It showed how thoroughly modern systems can be turned against humanity while retaining the appearance of order. That demonstration cannot be undone. It can only be understood and resisted. This understanding does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. It removes the illusion that safety lies in assuming such things cannot happen again. Safety lies in examining how power is structured, how authority is constrained, and how easily moral judgment is outsourced. The SS operated in shadows, but relied on light, on visible rules, on public compliance, on institutions that continued to function normally while atrocity unfolded behind their walls. This coexistence is the most disturbing aspect of its legacy. Horror did not interrupt daily life. It was integrated into it. As the final chapter of this story approaches, what remains is not a list of crimes, but a warning encoded in history. The SS did not emerge fully formed. It was built. It was maintained. It was expanded. It was accepted. At every stage, choices were made. Those choices did not belong only to leaders or fanatics. They belonged to clerks, professionals, neighbors, and institutions. The SS succeeded because it embedded itself in a normalcy until normalcy itself became complicit. This is the truth that refuses to fade with time. The SS is not only a reminder of what happened, but of how easily it happened once the conditions aligned. And as long as power seeks efficiency without accountability, as long as obedience is rewarded over conscience, the shadow it cast will remain relevant, demanding recognition rather than denial. The story is not finished yet. The danger of distance is not forgetting facts. It is forgetting urgency. As the SS recedes further into history, there is a quiet temptation to treat it as something complete, sealed, explained, and therefore harmless. Museums are visited. Documents are archived. Anniversaries are observed. The rituals of remembrance give the impression that the work is done. But remembrance without vigilance is fragile. The SS does not demand attention because of how long ago existed, but because of how clearly it reveals the pathways through which power corrodes restraint. The organization did not rely on secrecy alone. It relied on legitimacy. It wrapped itself in law, procedure, and necessity. Orders were stamped. Forms were signed. Meetings were held. Everything that happened was framed as official, sanctioned, authorized. This legitimacy mattered more than fear. Fear can provoke resistance. Legitimacy dissolves it. When people believe a system is lawful, they adjust themselves to it rather than challenge it. This is one of the SS' most enduring lessons. Violence does not need to announce itself as criminal to succeed. It needs to present itself as administrative, as preventative, as unavoidable. Once harm is framed as policy rather than choice, responsibility fades into abstraction. The SS understood this instinctively. It did not abolish institutions. It absorbed them. Police forces were not dismantled. They were integrated. Courts were not eliminated. They were sidelined. Medicine was not rejected. It was repurposed. Science was not silenced. It was recruited. Each profession retained its identity while surrendering its ethical anchor. This allowed participants to continue seeing themselves as professionals rather than perpetrators. The SS also demonstrated how power feeds on predictability. Once people understand what is expected, most will comply simply to avoid risk. The organization cultivated this predictability carefully. Rules were clear. Consequences were harsh, but inconsistent. This inconsistency kept fear alive while maintaining order. People learned to stay within invisible boundaries without being told where they were. Over time, this self-regulation replaced overt coercion. The SS did not need to be everywhere. It needed to be believed to be everywhere. Surveillance did not require constant monitoring. It required the possibility of monitoring. This psychological control was more efficient than brute force and far more durable. As the post-war world tried to rebuild trust in institutions, this realization created unease. How could systems designed to protect become tools of destruction so easily? The answer lay not in ideology alone, but in incentives. The SS rewarded obedience, efficiency, and loyalty. It punished hesitation, empathy, and dissent. Over time, these incentives reshaped behavior until cruelty felt normal and restraint felt dangerous. This process is not unique to one historical moment. It is a pattern that emerges whenever authority is insulated from scrutiny, when oversight is framed as obstruction, when transparency is labeled as weakness, when dissent is treated as disloyalty. The SS exploited all of these dynamics, not accidentally, but deliberately. The organization's leaders understood that total control did not require total participation. It required enough participation to isolate resistance. Those who questioned were removed early. Those who complied were promoted. Those who adapted survived. The result was an environment where opposition felt futile and dangerous long before violence reached its peak. One of the most disturbing aspects of the SS is how thoroughly it normalized its presence. Black uniforms became familiar. Camps became landmarks. Deportations became routine. Trains became background noise. Horror unfolded alongside daily life without disrupting it. This coexistence numbed perception. People learned to live beside atrocity by compartmentalizing it. This compartmentalization persists as a human coping mechanism. When systems become overwhelming, individuals narrow their focus to what they can control. The SS exploited this instinct ruthlessly. It overwhelmed society with structure, speed, and inevitability, leaving little space for reflection or resistance. In studying the SS, historians often emphasize moments of choice. The decision to join, the decision to obey, the decision to look away. These moments mattered, but they were shaped by context. The organization did not rely on constant moral tests. It engineered environments where the easiest choice was the worst one. This engineering is what makes the SS relevant beyond its crimes. It reveals how systems can guide behavior without explicit coercion, how participation can feel passive even when it is active, how people can become instruments without feeling responsible for the outcome. The SS also showed how quickly categories of exclusion can expand. What began with political opponents grew to encompass entire populations. Each expansion was justified as necessary. Each step made the next easier. Once identity replaced behavior as the basis for punishment, there was no logical endpoint. This logic remains one of the most dangerous legacies of the SS. When societies accept that some people are threats by nature rather than action, they abandon the possibility of restraint. Policy becomes destiny. Violence becomes preventative. The line between security and annihilation disappears. As decades pass, the temptation to reduce the SS to a symbol rather than a system grows. Symbols are easier to condemn. Systems require examination. The SS challenges comfortable narratives that separate evil from normality. It insists on being understood as an organization that functioned precisely because it appeared normal to those inside it. This insistence makes its history uncomfortable to engage with honestly. It removes the distance that allows moral superiority. It asks harder questions. Would resistance have been easy? Would courage have been rewarded? Would compliance have felt safer? The SS forces these questions because it thrived on ordinary human instincts rather than exceptional cruelty alone. The collapse of the organization did not dismantle those instincts. Fear, conformity, ambition, and obedience remain constants. What changes are the structures that amplify or restrain them. The SS amplified them without limit. That amplification is the true warning. As new technologies emerge, the relevance of this warning intensifies. Surveillance becomes more sophisticated. Data becomes more centralized. Decision-making becomes more automated. The potential for distance between action and consequence grows. The SS demonstrated how dangerous that distance can be when combined with ideology and authority. This does not mean modern societies are destined to repeat the past. It means the safeguards that prevent repetition must be intentional. Transparency, accountability, ethical limits, the willingness to question authority even when it claims necessity. These are not abstract ideals. They are practical defenses against the logic that sustained the SS. The organization believed it was creating order. It believed it was protecting civilization from collapse. In doing so, it revealed how easily the language of protection can be inverted, how order can become oppression, how efficiency can become extermination. This inversion did not happen suddenly. It happened gradually, through policy, through routine, through acceptance. The SS teaches that waiting for obvious evil is waiting too long. By the time horror is undeniable, the system that produces it is already entrenched. The responsibility that follows from this understanding is uncomfortable. It requires constant attention. It requires skepticism toward claims of inevitability. It requires remembering that systems are built by people and can be challenged by people before they harden into instruments of harm. The SS did not begin with genocide. It began with loyalty, with protection, with order. Those beginnings were not recognized as dangerous because they mirrored familiar desires: safety, stability, belonging. The tragedy lies in how those desires were exploited. As this story approaches its final movement, what remains is not closure, but tension. The tension between remembering and acting, between understanding and applying that understanding. The SS is not only a chapter in history. It is a measure against which power can be tested. The question it leaves behind is simple and relentless. When authority demands obedience, when systems prioritize efficiency over humanity, when difference is framed as threat, what safeguards remain? The answer determines whether the shadow of the SS stays confined to the past or stretches forward into the future. And that question has not yet been resolved. The final danger is not denial. It is familiarity. When a story is told often enough, it risks becoming comfortable, its sharpest edges worn smooth by repetition. The SS resists that comfort. It refuses to become a closed subject because its meaning is not confined to what happened, but to what was revealed about power, obedience, and modern systems when they are stripped of moral restraint. The end of this story is not an ending at all. It is a warning that remains unfinished. The SS did not rise because Germans were uniquely cruel or because history demanded catastrophe. It rose because fear met opportunity, because authority promised certainty, because institutions prioritized order over ethics, and because enough people chose adaptation over resistance. These forces are not historical artifacts. They are constants. They appear wherever insecurity is exploited and responsibility is diluted. What made the SS so effective was not secrecy alone. It was participation. Millions interacted with its machinery without wearing its uniform. Clerks processed paperwork. Engineers designed facilities. Doctors evaluated bodies. Police enforced orders. Railway workers followed schedules. Each action felt small, technical, detached. Together, they formed a system capable of annihilating entire populations without ever declaring itself irrational. This is the truth that lingers most heavily after the last chapter closes. The SS did not require universal belief. It required sufficient compliance. It did not need everyone to hate. It needed people to function. Once functioning replaced questioning, the system no longer depended on ideology to sustain itself. It ran on routine. The organization's leaders understood this with chilling clarity. They built structures that rewarded obedience and punished deviation. They insulated decision-makers from consequences. They fragmented responsibility until guilt had nowhere to land. These techniques did not die with the SS. They persist as possibilities within any complex system. The aftermath of the SS teaches that accountability is fragile. Even after exposure, justice was partial. Many perpetrators escaped consequences entirely. Some reintegrated into society. Some rebuilt careers. The system that destroyed lives dissolved faster than the harm it caused. This imbalance is not unique. It is a feature of large-scale violence. Systems move faster than moral reckoning. Survivors carried this knowledge forward in their bodies and memories. Many spoke so that the machinery that tried to erase them would not succeed in erasing the truth. They described not only suffering, but structure, not only cruelty, but procedure. Their testimonies dismantled the illusion that evil must look chaotic or irrational. As generations pass, the burden of memory shifts again. Without living witnesses, the story depends entirely on institutions, education, and choice. The SS becomes a test of whether societies are willing to remember honestly rather than comfortably. Honest memory does not reassure. It unsettles. Comforting narratives insist that such systems belong to another time, another place, another mentality. The SS rejects this reassurance. It demonstrates that modernity itself can be weaponized, that efficiency, discipline, and professionalism are not safeguards against atrocity. Without ethical limits, they become accelerants. The organization believed it was building permanence. It invested in infrastructure, training, succession. It imagined a future in which its logic would govern generations. That future collapsed under military defeat, but the demonstration remained. The SS showed what happens when power operates without restraint and calls it order. The final lesson of the SS is not that humanity is doomed to repeat its worst crimes. It is that prevention is neither automatic nor permanent. It requires constant attention to how authority is exercised, how institutions are structured, and how language shapes perception. Genocide does not begin with killing. It begins with classification, with exclusion, with the normalization of harm as policy. This understanding shifts responsibility forward. The story of the SS is not complete when the last camp is liberated or the last verdict delivered. It continues wherever systems demand obedience without accountability, wherever dissent is framed as threat, wherever efficiency is valued more than dignity. The SS did not emerge fully formed. It evolved. Each stage appeared defensible in isolation. Protection became surveillance. Surveillance became detention. Detention became labor. Labor became extermination. At no point did the system announce its final destination. It revealed it only when resistance was no longer possible. That gradualism is the most dangerous aspect of its legacy. It teaches that waiting for obvious brutality is waiting too long. By the time violence is undeniable, the machinery that produces it is already entrenched. The responsibility that follows is heavy, but unavoidable. It belongs not only to governments and institutions, but to individuals who participate in systems larger than themselves. The SS demonstrated how easily responsibility can be outsourced upward, how tempting it is to believe that following rules absolves moral judgment. This temptation has not vanished. It appears whenever people tell themselves they're only doing their jobs, only enforcing policy, only following procedure. The SS stands as the ultimate consequence of that belief when it goes unchallenged. The organization's crimes were extreme, but the mechanisms that enabled them were ordinary. That is why the story must end where it began, not with horror alone, but with awareness. Awareness that systems shape behavior. Awareness that authority can be seductive. Awareness that moral disengagement is gradual. The SS collapsed because it was defeated, not because it exhausted its logic. That logic remains available. It waits in moments of crisis, in demands for absolute security, in appeals to necessity. The question is not whether it can return, but whether it will be recognized early enough to be stopped. The final image is not one of uniforms or camps, but of choice. Choice at the level of policy. Choice at the level of profession. Choice at the level of silence or speech. The SS thrived when choices were deferred, when responsibility dissolved into structure. The story closes not with resolution, but with obligation. To remember without simplification. To study without distancing. To recognize that the line between order and annihilation is thinner than it appears when conscience is replaced by obedience. The SS believed it was the future. Instead, it became a warning written into history with a measurable cost. That warning remains intact only as long as it is taken seriously. And that is where this story truly ends. Not in the past, but in the present, where its meaning must be carried forward, or risk being repeated.